So my first question would be, what does photography mean to you? Why do you take pictures?
Oh, I take pictures to celebrate life, to celebrate my life, and to try and understand my life. You know, through putting a camera between myself and life helps me to see it differently, to bring life into focus, I guess you could say.
So how did you get into photography?
I started when I was 12 years old, and you know, I lived in the country. My family lived in the country, and and the rest of our family, all the relatives, lived in the city, and so they would come to our home in the summertime for their vacations, and that's when they would all take photographs. You know, I noticed they would all, you know, rearrange themselves, and take photographs in every situation they were in, like they were. You know, the idea that people take photographs of the things they want to remember. So when they were happy, they would take photographs. You know, when you're on vacation, you're happy. So that had a big influence on me, and I remember thinking that I wanted to create my own photographic record. So yeah.
So at such a young age, did anyone put you down of taking pictures?
No, nobody really encouraged me either. But it was just this. It just seemed to be this. You know, I got addicted to the magic of photography very fast. You know, the idea of making an image and then, you know, freezing reality or freezing time, and then, you know, taking it to the drugstore, getting the film developed and the photographs in a little envelope, and then reliving my past in a sense. That was really sort of magical.
So who would be, if you had to choose one person, who would your biggest influence be?
One person. Oh, and
One person.
Oh, and that's a difficult question, isn't it? It's a really difficult question because, you know, as I've evolved, it's been different people. Yeah. Would you want someone now or someone from my past?
Someone that has influenced this work that you have in this art show.
Yeah, well, it's always people that I know. You know, and I would say, you know, I took for 20 years, I took photographs without any formal training, so kind of self-taught. And then so I was taking photographs without really thinking about why I was taking photographs. And then I went to undergraduate when I was 35 years old. I went back to Scotland, went to undergraduate. So my early teachers are probably my biggest influence. It's a guy called David Williams and Robin Galanders and Colin Gray. Three people who really, you know, sort of helped me bring photography into consciousness, make it a conscious practice.
Are there any other photographers that have influenced your work?
Yeah, I mean, from the history of photography, like I'm really influenced by early feminist photographers. You know, it's I think Alice Austin and Frances Benjamin Johnson. You know, I'm kind of attracted to their work and sort of the second wave feminist photographers also, because they open up the door for men to talk about more personal issues and, you know, address more personal concerns in their work, because they were struggling against, you know, the male-dominated world of photography, world of everything. You know, they couldn't even vote when they were making these photographs, but there were protest photographs about how, you know, how they weren't taken seriously because they were women. So that I'm really affected by them. I'm also really influenced by Dwayne Michaels, who's a photographer who uses just, you know, a 35mm camera and just black and white film and, you know, some darkroom techniques, makes little 8x10 prints, but it's the most simple and most direct approach to making photographs, but it addresses issues of his relationship with the universe, which I'm also very interested in. You know, how do you use whatever medium you're passionate about, how do you use that to help you understand what your relationship with the universe is? So I like that kind of stuff.
You were talking about in your show, in your artist lecture, you consider most of these portraits.
Yes.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So how would you portray these as portraits?
Well, you know,
when they're not of yourself,
right.
Self-portraits.
I know, and the definition of portraiture, of course, is quite a, you know, it's subjective, I guess, isn't it? You know, you can, whatever you, I think, you know, if you think something's a portrait, then it is a portrait, you know. So, yeah. But these are, you know, literally portraits, but they're portraits also from my life. They're snapshots from my life.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, I documented my life, you know, through self-portraiture, you know, because I spent a lot of time alone. And but then I came to a point where I realized that portraits were also self-portraits.
So how did you start off with portraits? And has it changed over the years? Like, did you start with portraits?
Yeah, I started with portraits. I guess I did photograph people, but then I left. I emigrated to Canada when I was 18, and I always remember it was kind of I was on a big adventure, and I lived in the north of Canada, and I went home after a year and a half back to Scotland, and I remember giving a slideshow to I gathered all my relatives and I wanted to share my experience that I had in Canada with them, so I gave them a slideshow. Everybody had dinner, then we all assembled in the living room with a slide projector and a screen, and I started to show them, images of my adventure in Canada, which was all photographs of like trees and airplanes and bears and lakes, and everybody fell asleep within 5 minutes. So, and I remember my father saying to me, where are the people? So he became my audience, and when I went back to Canada, I started photographing people, and I would call them photographing people rather than portraits because they would be on the other side of the room. I would be in one side of the room, the person would be in the other side of the room because I was very shy and very nervous about photographing people. But it took, over the course of years, I'm able now to photograph in what I would regard as the comfort zone, the sort of conversation space. So it took me years of practice to become comfortable taking photographs of other people.
What is the most challenging thing you find as a photographer?
Most challenging thing I find as a photographer, I suppose self-promotion. The act of taking a photograph, I've been doing it for over 50 years now, so I'm very confident taking photographs. But then what to do with them after you've taken them, especially since I work in academia and I need to have an exhibition record and publishing record, and so I find it very difficult to promote myself as a photographer because I 90% of the pleasure, 95% of the pleasure is the interaction when taking a photograph. What happens to afterwards, is kind of incidental.
Hardest question of the day. Ooh. So, among your work, what is your favorite piece?
My favorite piece? Well, they've all been my favorite piece, because most of these photographs represent the past. I would say the photographs of Beau, the young boy that I photograph now, he represents the future for me. So I would say the photographs of him that I have in the exhibition are my favorites because they represent the future, not necessarily the past.
So what do you hope that your viewers take away from your photography?
That they should celebrate life, and that they should try to be present in the moment and use photography to celebrate the moment and to celebrate relationships with people they love.
What is your typical thought process when creating a photo like one of these?
Well, if I could talk about the one with my friend Andrea, and Mia and Corey, and Andrea is showing her belly because she wants to become pregnant, and Mia is pregnant, and Corey has a child. It's kind of an evolution there. But the thing that the impulse to make a photograph like that is, first of all, it's the subject, but it's also the light. So the light was very rich, high quality light. So I had these three of my best friends, and I had this beautiful light, but there was also a story there, and it's also about giving birth, I guess, isn't it? Having children, in different sort of stages of that. So, and then so that photograph represents kind of it's an important part of my history, and it's also an important part of their history. So we have celebrated that together. And then making a print like that, it's all of these photographs were shot on 35 millimeter slide film. So it's all positive film, and I decided to make them all from the same sort of original source, which is slide film. And then I would digitally scan those, and then make inkjet prints in an Epson printer from them. And so just a little bit of Photoshop, a little bit of Lightroom, and printing. Although software is not my strongest point, but if the exposure is really good, which it was in this case, if the exposure is really good, then the printing is really easy as well. So that's the process, I guess.
All right, and last question, do you have any advice for future photographers?
take a lot of photographs. Don't stop. That's the best way to become a good photographer, is to practice. And it's something it's a difficult challenge when teaching, you know, because I always say to my students, you know, if they're learning a foreign language or they're learning how to play a musical instrument, they know that they have to practice every day, but they don't make that connection with photography. But photography, it's just as important to practice every day as it is with a musical instrument or a foreign language. So take a lot of photographs.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, my pleasure.